Hello and welcome. Well, one would argue that parenting, although an absolute honour, is most probably the hardest thing anyone will ever have to do. And undertaking the role of a step parent, however, can be particularly challenging as the roles can be a little more complex and the responsibilities can be somewhat divided. Coupled with this, children can feel, conflicting loyalties between their parents and step parents, amongst a range of other emotions. Let's face it, there's several contributing factors that can lead to step parenting, and whatever the reasons are, becoming one can be equally rewarding as challenging. That said, we're here today to discuss, the common issues that may arise, answer any day-to-day questions and share top tips to allow you to find a way of step parenting that will suit you and your family. And to help discuss this topic, we welcome our special guest, Karalee Katsambanis, an accomplished Australian TV commentator, journalist, columnist, and media trainer. Now, she has worked across Australia's mainstream TV, radio, newspapers, magazines, and online for the past 20 years. Now, she's also a mother of 3 children and stepmother to 2 young adults. And Karalee is also the author to the book, hold it up, Karalee, Step Parenting with Purpose. Everything you wanted to know but were too afraid to ask, which provides invaluable insights and advice to those beginning or already on their step parenting journey. Thank you for joining us today. How are you?
Hey, I'm fine. Hello, Rachel. Hello, everyone. I'm really delighted to be here. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, this is great. And this is a topic that we haven't really spoken about much to date. So I'm really excited to be able to bring this to the forefront of people's hearts and minds, and to be able to provide some assistance. And who better to do it than someone with the experience? Now, the foundations, for step families are quite different and require, of course, careful negotiation of roles and responsibilities. Now, you, as I mentioned before, a step parent, of course. So to begin with, and speaking about the book, how did you come to write the book?
Well, I came to write the book. I was 32 years old. I was a flying television reporter and newsreader and all bits and pieces on radio as well when I met my husband. So I was working 7 days a week, completely single life, running around here, there and everywhere. Suddenly I met this amazing man, and he was divorced with 2 kids. And most of my friends gave a gulp. My family went, oh, and I thought, oh, this is the man I'm going to marry. But he comes with 2 children. So the reason why the book came about is I have now been a step parent to my 2 stepchildren, a stepson and a stepdaughter, for 15 years. They are now aged 26 and 25. But when I very first met them, they were 11, 12 and 13 when we got married. So I decided to write the book because I found that there were a lot of things that I had gone through, and I couldn't actually find any resources at the time to help, as opposed to just clicking on and watching the odd episode of Oprah and Dr. Phil, which really wasn't very helpful at the time. And what happened was we'd been married for about a decade, and then a lot of friends of mine began either getting into long-term partnerships or marriages with men who had also been married or had kids or children from previous relationships. And let me just make quite clear on this podcast, I'm married, but my message is for anybody that is in a long-term partnership, de facto marriage, not negating anything, but just to keep it simple, I'll just say if you're married or something like that. And what I found was that my friends, I was 10 years down the track, and my friends would say to me, Karalee, oh my goodness, did this ever happen to you with your stepkids? And I'd say, oh yeah, actually it did. And they'd say, what did you do? And so I said, look, please be aware, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychiatrist, I have studied some psychology, but I said, these are the practical things that I've found helped and maybe provided a circuit breaker if you're experiencing some issues with your stepchildren or perhaps with their other parent. See if they work. And all my friends came back and said, wow, they're great, they're really practical, and it's really helped. And so then a couple of friends said to me, you've got to write a book one day. And I decided to write the book. I decided to wait 15 years to write the book because I thought it was much better to write a retrospective look at things rather than a reactive look at things.
Fantastic.
And I think that that's important because, hindsight gives you a lot of wisdom, and it's not that you would change everything all over again, but you get a lot more perspective when you've gone through something and then you're reflecting back on it.
Absolutely.
So I wrote the book, and it was titled, Step Parenting with Purpose, because if you don't go into step parenting with a really good purpose to make a positive difference to these children that are now part of your life, then you're doomed to fail. But also the tagline for the book is everything you wanted to know but were too afraid to ask, because in an ideal world, when you're a step parent, you do think, oh, I'm just going to be, a part-time parent and taking them here and taking them there and doing this. But you also don't realize that there are a lot of other dynamics at play that may suddenly rear their head when you're on the journey, whether it's problems with the ex-partner of your current partner, or other family members, or your stepchildren who are being pulled in all different directions or pumped with information, things that you haven't realized. And I think one of my biggest bugbears, and if there are any step parents that are listening, whenever a step parent is struggling with something and a friend says, oh, but you knew what you were getting into, it just raises the hairs on the back of your neck, and you actually either shut down and you don't bother talking to that person again and you quickly change subject, or you start thinking to yourself, hang on a second, did I know? Let me reassure everyone listening to this. When you sign up as a step parent, 9 out of 10 times you're signing up to be able to make a really positive difference, and in a very positive way, to those children that are in your care. Mm-hmm. You are not signing up for the emotional blackmail games. You're not signing up for the bad mouthing. I mean, I don't want to make it all sound doom and gloom, but part of my book is actually saying I've got a lot of strategies and tips and things that will help you with the situations that you soon find affect every step family around the world, no matter where they live, no matter how much they earn, no matter what they do. There are these underlying things and issues that face step families, and a lot of it comes down to jealousy of exes and human nature. And as a step parent, you don't have that reference point because you're not part of that history. You're coming in to make that difference, but suddenly you become being like you become like a target or a bit of a battering ram in some way. And really, the issues that are between your partner and their ex are between them. They're not between you, but you sort of get caught into that as well, which is really sad. So yes. My book, as I said, I've had some really lovely letters from people around the world. I mean, I'm not showing off, but it's been sold in the UK, the USA, Europe, Canada, Australia. I was very privileged. It went to #1 on Amazon 48 hours after its release. And then, of course, we had the COVID shutdown. So that was a whole other story. But I get these messages from people around the world that say, thank you. We do not feel alone. You actually get it. And I'm very proud to say that, yes, I do get it. I mean, it is a positive experience, but you have to be very naive to think that you are not going to encounter some difficult behaviours along the way.
Well, it's been said that it's a book that you wish you would have had 15 years ago when you started your step parenting journey. So what is it about step parenting that you're so passionate about then?
Okay. One of the things that I'm really passionate about is I always say that there is no one right way to step parent in a step parent family, but there is always one right way with how you behave towards others in the step family. And that is with respect, whether it's to the ex, whether it's the ex towards you, whether it's the stepchildren. Step families have their own unique dynamics, but good manners, good behaviour, speaking properly, not bad-mouthing, that is non-negotiable. And why I'm passionate about step parenting properly in this way is that if the stepchildren can't see some good, respectful working relationships between their step-parent and their parents, so both sets of parents, both step-parents, then you know what? The odds are within a decade or so, odds are they'll be step parents themselves. Maybe they'll have stepchildren,
Yes.
and the cycle will continue of bad dysfunctional behaviours. Now, let me make this very clear. I'm not saying to every step parent that you need to say to your husband or your partner's ex-wife, hey, come and have a cup of tea with me once a week and let's go shopping and let's do this. I'm not saying that at all. But what I am saying is that there should be no bad mouthing. Same with, say, the mum. You know, if the stepkids have just been with you for a weekend and say they've done some cooking with you, and say the mum isn't a cook, but the stepmum is. When your child goes back with some muffins, there are so many mums that will say, oh, put those in the bin, not having anything to do with that woman. And what happens is if you've got a little child that's 8, 9 or 10, they've just been so excited that they can do some cooking with their stepmom. They're not thinking of those adult concepts. They've taken the muffins back and suddenly, and I give a few talks and things, and I often say to people, if your best friend was a cook and you weren't, and she looked after your daughter or son for an afternoon, they made muffins or a cake and brought it back, would you eat it? Would you say that's nice? And they say, of course. So you need to do that as well, because what you also have to realize is if you've got a stepmom or a stepdad that is trying to bond with your child in some way and find some common ground, they are not wanting to replace you as the mum or the dad. They are not wanting to take over your role. They are just wanting to try and carve out a role to bond with their stepchildren and show them some nice positive behaviours. So I'm passionate because I think that you never find a biological mum or dad. And you know that there are good and bad step parents and there are good and bad parents, but you never find a biological mum or dad that will actually admit to bad behavior. And they may not even realize what that bad behavior is. It might be a roll of the eyes if the stepchild comes back and says, oh, we went for a hike or we went for a cycle. It might be a roll of the eyes. And all those negative connotations that are being put onto these stepchildren. Stepchildren aren't silly. They feed off things and they'll soon pick up if there's tension between mum and the stepmum or dad or whatever. You don't need to be the best of friends, but what you need to realize is that your main priority and goal should be the welfare, love, and care of the stepchildren, because they're the ones that are really important. They're going to go forward in life. You don't want these dysfunctional behaviors being replicated again.
Yes. Now, we published your article, Top 10 Tips for Step Parents. For someone who hasn't read the article, can you please give us an overview what the article is about and tell us what inspired you to write it?
Well, look, I just wanted to keep things fairly simple. When you become a step parent, there is so much information around. And I think, number one, the step parent is always wanting to do the right thing. And you're always worrying and second guessing and things like that. And I thought, well, I'm going to just give 10 top tips of what you can actually do to try and be a really good step parent and also to get a bit of harmony within your step family. Because what I often say is in our domestic situation, we did try the 1 week on, 1 week off for a few months. It didn't work for us. And so for the majority of the years, we did exactly half the holidays, but we did every alternate fortnight. So kids coming over on a Thursday, going home on a Sunday night. But the reason why I came up with the tips was that what a step parent will often find is that it depends if they've perhaps been driven over by their mum. You don't know what has been said in the car. And so quite often on a Thursday, you might have made a special meal or something. The kids might come in, there might be niggly behaviour or this or that. And as a stepmom or a stepdad, you take it personally instead of realising you don't know what perhaps that parent has said to the kids. All right, they need time to settle in as well. So what happens is you then probably get on an even keel maybe by Saturday. And then, of course, on Sunday night, they're gone again for another 10 days. And I think it's important to remember that for a lot of these kids, like in my stepchildren's situation, from the age of 10 and 11, they've been shuttling back and forth between homes with suitcases. And it's a lot of change and angst and stress that a lot of the children go through that are living between homes. So I came up with some top tips just for step parents and also parents just to remember, because we often are all guilty of looking at things through the adult eyes rather than the children's eyes. I mean, for example, I remember, and also my book is not getting back at my husband's ex-wife or anything like that. It's just sort of saying it as it is. What we often forget is that in an ideal world, kids would remember things, all right, same as adults. But if you've got your children coming every 10 days or so, they've got split school schedules as well. You might not have enough money to have double uniforms. And there may be occasions where in that sort of custody access visit, say when they're with the stepmom and the dad, they've forgotten the netball skirt or they've forgotten the footy socks. We had a couple of situations where my husband's ex-wife would actually not allow the kids back to her house to pick up a spare sports uniform or something. Now, in hindsight, had she just met somebody, did she want to have some romantic time and didn't, wanted to know that she was clear for 3 or 4 days? That's her business, that's her prerogative. But really, I just implore all parents to realize that no one is perfect. And there shouldn't be any problem that if someone has forgot an outfit or something like that, but they can't just go home and get it or be dropped off. It doesn't, you understand what I'm trying to say? So
what have you actually found are some of the most common challenges that new step parents face? And in your view, how can they sort of overcome them?
Okay, well, one of the common things that I find is that, all right, as much as you might want to, as a step parent, it is not your job to fix your stepchildren. Sometimes just being there is enough to make that difference. All right, so I'll say it again. As much as you might want to, as a step parent, it is not your job to fix your stepchildren. Sometimes just being there is enough to make that difference. Now, when I became a step parent, I hadn't been a parent before. We've since had 3 children. But at the time, I found that I was trying to be very mature and I was wanting to try and just make everything better and fix it all. At the end of the day, they're not your children. In 9 times out of 10 cases, they've got a mum and a dad. And not everybody agrees with the way people parent. And while it's nice to have some common goals and common ground rules between homes, it doesn't always happen. All right, we don't live in a utopia or anything like that. And so I found that when I remembered, no, it's not my job to fix all this. My job is to be there, that they can talk to, know that they've always got someone that they can ask something or ask a second opinion, know that someone will always be there to look after them and things. That is probably a really important point for step parents to remember. Another important point I think that will help everybody, and I'm speaking not only to step parents whose partners may not realise this, because quite often the partner doesn't realise this. Okay, high conflict manipulation is actually not co-parenting. It's detrimental to everyone. So if you're, a lot of partners, so for example, a lot of men, they're worried that if they don't jump to every little tune that the ex-wife says, they're going to be denied access to their kids. And we've seen some court cases where games are played. But at the end of the day, if you've got a schedule set down and you've arranged, one weekend to swap because there might be a family occasion for one side of the family, you need to swap it and this and that. Whenever you get an ex that swaps around and goes, oh no, well, I'm not doing it now. That's manipulation, and that's high conflict manipulation. You have to have it on both sides. I mean, we had an example where when both our young ones, they were christened. Our youngest 2 are 12 months apart, and we had swapped a weekend about a month earlier because my husband's ex-wife's sister, she was having a christening, and we thought, yep, no problem. But when it came to upholding the thing of my stepkids being able to come to our kids' christening, she didn't let them come. She dropped them off for 10 minutes at the end of a Sunday, and that was it. So they could have a quick photo, and then that was it. Now, okay, people say, well, that shouldn't happen. You can't go to court all the time. At the end of the day, you can only control what you do, what you say, and how you act. And so what I would say to people is be reasonable. you could have 6 years, you could have 10 years, you could have 18 years of step parenting. You can't nut down every single custody access visit. Things crop up. So you might not like your ex-partner and his new partner, but be reasonable as well, because you're going to have just as much stuff on your side of the family as they might on theirs.
Great advice. And do you find it's common that children, I guess, will not want their situation to change and will want it to return to how it was before? Do you find that that's sort of a very common thing?
Look, I haven't found that in my way. What I will tell you is that kids are very perceptive to tension and all bits and pieces. And quite frankly, if there's been a lot of arguing and rowing going on between their parents, maybe through the divorce, they'll actually be relieved that they've got a bit of a quieter place, that things have calmed down. But they're always going to have a loyalty to their parents, always. And I always say to a step parent, you're never going to break that loyalty, and nor should you be wanting to break that loyalty. But one other important piece of advice that I have got for all the exes is this: please remember, your ex is your ex, but they will never be your children's ex. So don't badmouth them.
Yes.
Don't badmouth them. Okay, now I'm being very general here, because there are a lot of men that don't pay their child support, don't fulfill their obligations. There's a lot of women that don't pay their child support, that don't fulfill their obligations. But in the main, that's an adult issue to deal with. If you're not getting paid maintenance or child support, you have every right to be angry. But what you don't have every right to do is to say to your kids, oh, you're so-and-so dad, or you're good for nothing thing, or that dreadful stepmother. You don't have the right to do that. What you do have the right to do is go down the pub or hang out with your girlfriends and call him and the new person every name under the sun. But when it comes to your kids, zip it, lock it, and put it in your pocket.
Great
and
advice.
Do not ever badmouth your ex.
Yes.
That is the number one thing as well, because my stepson actually said to me when he was 18, he said, you've never badmouthed my mum or her family. And I said, no, I don't have any need to. And no one should. No one should. Marriages and partnerships break up for a myriad of reasons, but, you know, you just have to be firm, fair, and consistent.
And with regards to, I guess, the bond that step parents build with their stepchildren, you know, should step parents expect that the bond won't always necessarily form straight away, that sometimes it can take time and in some cases even years? I'd love to know, do you have any tips here?
Yeah, look, I do. And I've got a little statistic for you. The average time for that bond to happen is between 4 and 7 years.
That's a long time. Wow.
It is, but it could take longer. It could take a decade, because what you have to remember, what everyone has to remember is, if your stepkids are living with, just say, for example, their mum as the primary parent for the majority of the time, you can only control what you say and what you do with your stepkids. You've got no control over what is going on in that house. And she might be bad-mouthing you all day, every day, etc. Subconsciously, it goes in. The stepchildren are going to be reluctant to have that bond with you, because they're going to think that they're dishonouring or being disloyal to their mum. They may not unravel that until their 20s. Maybe they will be step parents themselves and suddenly get it. That's something that you can't control. And, you know, I've said to friends that are step parents, it is difficult. That is the difficulty of being a step parent. But don't give any ammunition to your stepkids. If they know that you've never badmouthed their mum, or they'll know it. Don't ever stoop to that level. I mean, you have to be pretty naive as a step parent to think that you're not going to be bad-mouthed a few times. It is very highly unlikely that both sets of parents and both sets of step parents get on like a house on fire. It's very naive to think that. So
step parents really should just try to be accommodating and just communicate openly, do you think?
And also your step parents aren't a doormat. I mean, you have a house. If your stepchildren are coming over, at times in the beginning, you might feel like an insider. You might feel like you've got to shrink and make yourself invisible and try and accommodate every single need of the stepkids and be walked over. You're not to be disrespected in your home. What we did with my stepkids is, you know, we brought them into things, and I said, listen, I don't know what the rules are at your mum's house. What I would like you to do is I'd like you to choose a chore, because you're part of the family, whether you want to clear the table or set the table, maybe make your bed every day, put your washing in the washing basket. And I used to say, to me, these are normal household things. How do you feel about it? And that's way that you get them to sort of do things, because it's also important to remember that they are part of a family. You're not a hotel. And if you start doing everything for them, you're going to end up with very spoilt teenagers and nightmares of young people in their 20s by the time they grow up, because you've done everything for them, because you think, oh my goodness, will they like me? Will they not? If you talk openly to them and say, listen, we all have to do chores, then you find that you get a really good working result.
Great
there.
advice. Now, we published your article, which beautifully highlights the top 10 tips for step parents. Now, can you please, we're not going to go through the whole 10. We'll have the link through to the article.
I haven't got the article here. Oh my goodness. Hang on, let me just try and find it. Hang on. Oh, sorry, this is right after.
That's okay.
So,
well,
let me have one quick.
Whilst you're having a look at that, I'll ask you another question then while you're doing that.
Yes, sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. Don't stress. All good. Well, in your view, I guess, what are some questions, I guess, you can suggest somebody ask their partner about how they would like them to parent or step parent their child? Do you have, is there any things that they should or shouldn't do? Things, for example, would you suggest, what should or shouldn't I do? How can we, give each other feedback without taking it personally? What role do you want me to play with your child? How do I qualify what's working and not working? These types of things should, any other questions you think that you should be asking? How do you want me to parent your child?
I'll answer this and I'll find that article. Look, I guess the thing is that it's very important as a step parent to have that understanding with your partner that any disciplining should really be coming from the actual biological father or mother. Mm-hmm. As a step parent, you really shouldn't get involved. Now, of course, if you're experiencing really, really bad behavior or something like that, you don't just sit there and take it. You're going to have to say something. But I would say to your partner that you must be on the same page when it comes to discipline as to what you're doing and what you're not. I mean, for example, every step parent will get, you're not my real mum, you're not my real dad. And I've had that. And you can just say, well, no, I'm not. I'm actually your stepmom and I actually love and care about you. But the way you're behaving at the moment is actually not acceptable. You're disrespecting me and you're disrespecting yourself and the family.
Yes.
So that's the way. And this is probably more for the teenage years than anything. I would also say to the partner to just also, and this is where I say it's very difficult, because you don't want to know everything about their past life, because that's in the past. They're with you for a reason, because it evidently didn't work. But it is also important to find out why the marriage or the long-term partnership did actually break up. All right, that is important. It might be an uncomfortable thing for people to talk about, but you do need to actually find out. Is it as simple that they just grew apart, they got together too young? Is it the fact that one of them was stricter on the kids than the other? Was it work pressures? Did one of them have an affair? Did one of them? You've really got to try and get to that thing so that you can actually move forward. Because, for example, if you're a woman and you're with a man and he did actually no disciplining at all and he let the kids run riot and this and that, and his ex-wife got really fed up of how he was parenting, are you going to be the one that's going to have to take that on? And while I say you've got to work out where your boundaries are as well, and you can't try and fix your stepkids, but establish your parenting style. Find out what is acceptable. Ask your partner, now, how is this going to work? I'm here to help parent your kids. They're now my stepkids. However, I think that, with discipline and this, that, and what have you, that should really be your area. And we need to, think of a few things ahead of time as to what may actually crop up.
Mm-hmm. As you mentioned before,
article.
It's okay. You weren't a parent first. So what if they haven't been a parent before? Do you have any advice for someone becoming a parent and a step parent for the first time? And how can, I guess, they develop their own parenting style? Is it a matter of them learning about the child's likes and dislikes and routines, and learning about positive parenting techniques, and even maybe taking a parenting class, or even understanding, I guess, the developmental stages of the stepchild? What are your thoughts on this sort of stuff?
Okay, so one thing that I always did is when I first met my stepkids, because I didn't have anything, I found out what their interests were. and I made sure that I didn't overstep the boundary. And that's also an important thing for step parents. You know,
no matter what their age is, so irrespective.
Doesn't matter what the age is. Don't try and one up their mum or their parent. You know, if they're into the latest, say, Liverpool soccer team or something like that, don't go out and spend $200 on soccer stuff and say, here you are, because you know that if they don't have that already, there's a reason for it. Maybe the parent can't afford it. Maybe they're waiting for an appropriate time to give them a gift. Maybe it's something they're working towards at school. Maybe the parent has said, listen, you keep getting your good grades, and at the end of the semester, we'll go and buy you the latest Liverpool top or whatever. I also think that with parenting, it's important to realize that, yes, if you don't have children before, you need to realize that you're not there to be a good time. You're not there to be their best friend. You're there to be an authority figure, but someone that they can trust and that they can talk to and that they can open up to as well. Because you've always got to think, there's that very famous movie with Susan Sarandon and Julia Roberts called Stepmom in the 80s. And it's one where the girl isn't allowed to go to pop concerts, during the week or anything like that. And of course, the stepmom gives the mum the idea that she wanted to get tickets to Pearl Jam, and she knew that it wasn't there. And the mum said, oh, okay. And then she suddenly bought the tickets, and she stole the idea, and she took them out, and she said, oh, thanks for the idea. Now, I'm just sort of using that as a bit of a flexible tool to say that you're not there to become the child's favorite parent. I mean, the number one, a tip that I want to give everyone is, remember, parenting is not a competition. Neither is step parenting. We're all meant to be on the same side of that actually loves and supports the children involved. Another important point to tell someone who may be becoming a step parent, or maybe they've met someone with kids, and this is really, really important. I was lucky because I worked most weekends and I had a lot of other obligations as well. Let's just say girl meets guy with 2 kids. He is not going to be able to drop those kids and whisk you away for a romantic weekend somewhere in the Victorian countryside. You're not going to be going and spending weekends away at all. It doesn't work like that. He may be your Prince Charming and your Mr. Right, but you've got to remember, as difficult as it might be to admit, he was also somebody's Mr. Right before you came along, and he made 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 children with that person. That relationship hasn't worked for a reason. He's now with you. Hopefully he's learned something from it as well. There's no mistakes in life. There's only lessons. But the thing is, I hear from a lot of people that say, oh, I've met him and it's something. You're not going to get that courtship that you might get if you were 2 single people, because those children that are there, they've got their sporting activities, they've got their school activities, they've got birthday parties, they've got commitments or whatever. As that step parent, you've got to realise, and I don't like using the phrase you're going to be second place, because no one is ever anybody's priority, but you're not going to be that priority on that weekend when those kids are over, and you've got to be able to be objective and be fair with that as well, because while their dad might be your Prince Charming and your Mr. Right, it's their dad. It's their dad. That's who they know, and that's who they need, and that's who they want. So I'm going to say that don't think just because you're with someone and you've got a great relationship that suddenly you are going to, perhaps on those alternate weekends, be able to go off on romantic things. Chances are you're not, because there will always be a sporting or a school thing
Something
that
else
comes up on technically when it might not be your custody weekend. So those kids really are that priority, and that's a big gulp and a big adjustment for a lot of people becoming step parents, that they really don't realise that it's not just going to be in a couple of months this will change. This is week in, week out for the next X number of years.
Mm-hmm. And I guess it's common when someone is new to becoming a step parent, they may ask themselves, if they should act as a parent from the very beginning or not. I mean, is there a right way to be a step parent, or is it something that you just figure out what suits you and the family unit and your family along the way? What are your thoughts?
Look, as I sort of said originally, my firm philosophy is that there is no one right way to step parent in a step parent family, but there is always one right way to behave, and that is with respect. There will be things that you figure out. I mean, as I said, my book covers all the issues that you will need to know, whether you've just met a guy with kids, whether you are a current step parent, even if you're a step parent 20 or 30 years down the track. I got a lovely letter from a woman in her 60s who became a step parent in her 20s, and she said, my goodness, I was revolutionary back then. There are a lot of things that you will figure out, but what you've also got to realize that I believe my book highlights is some of the pitfalls that will be ahead of you. And if you have an inkling as to what they may be, that is going to help you make the right decisions for what you do. I'll give you one very quick one. But for example, some of the games that are often played. If the child support is being paid, you will often find in the beginning, especially if your partner's ex hasn't repartnered yet, the kids will come over with tatty clothes. And odds are there'll be a family occasion and your husband or partner will say, can't have them going in that. We need to go and buy more clothes. And you might go and do that. And then those clothes will go back with the kids to their mums, and then you'll never see them again. And then the same thing will happen again. This is part of the game playing. What you need to realize is, and it sounds awful to say, but you need that objective head to say, no, we pay the child support. That's what it's for. The ex has sent the kids over in tatty clothes. They're going to have to wear them, because when the ex finds out that that's what's happened, that'll never happen again. That happened to us. Where my husband and I, we had very firm words, and I said, no, we're not going and buying them new outfits, because if we do that once, it'll always happen. Naturally, when the kids would drop back after the weekend, his ex was absolutely mortified that we took them there. So it was part of the game playing that she'd done. But I can say in, the 8 years, it never happened again. That's what I say where people will try them on. The other thing to remember is if you're paying your child support properly, there is very little money left over. Mm-hmm. In this day and age, there's a lot of bills. There's extra tutoring, there's dentists, there's haircuts, there's orthodontics, there's braces. A lot of people do it tough, and when child support is paid, there's not that much money left over at the end of a week. And if you start double paying for clothes, it's going to become expected. So my book will show you tips and strategies and how you can have a really good constructive conversation with the ex to say, listen, this game playing has to stop. These kids are important. You need to pack the right amount of things that they need each week. And you'll find that it's easier. But the problem is no one does it because they think, oh no, it's going to be awful. Oh, I can't let them be seen in tatty clothes. Unfortunately, yes, you can. And if you need to say, sorry, that's what their mum sent over, you need to have the confidence to say that.
Yes. And what happens in this situation if your stepchild rejects you or feels shy or feels uncomfortable around you, maybe more so in those first sort of four or so years you were saying before the relationship is really sort of, you've grown that bond. I mean, how can step parents best cope, I guess, with this situation and find a way to relate to the child if the child isn't bonding with you?
Okay, well, what I would say is that depending on the age of the child, I mean, if they're 3, 4, 5, it's very difficult. If they're getting into the 10 or the 11 or the 12, sit them down and have a conversation with them and reassure them that, you love their dad very much. You know that their mum and their dad loves them. You're not trying to be their mum. You can just say, look, I'm just trying to be a good friend to you, like an auntie. Say, I know this is a very difficult situation for you to be able to understand, but I'm here to be your friend. I'm here to help you out, and we'll work at our relationship as we go. Always show an interest in what they're doing. And if you know that they're into a specific sport or something like that, do a bit of background reading as well so that you can throw in a few things. Oh, okay, did you see, do you like this player or that player? And they'll think, wow, because you're taking an interest in them.
Yes.
At the end of the day, though, again, if they've got a very manipulative mum or dad or whatever who is filling their heads full of rubbish, you might not get that chance to sort things out until they're in their 20s. And even if they're then living with their toxic mum or their dad under the same roof, if they haven't moved out, you might not get that chance. However, what you will get that chance is that they will be able to look back and say properly, yep, so-and-so never badmouthed my mum or never did anything. I mean, there were times that when my stepkids leave, I'd say, be good to your mum, try and help her out. She's working full-time too, and they'd look at me with just a stunned look in their face. And I thought, yeah, I know that there's been a bit of bad mouthing going on.
It's
very important, as a step parent, to try and not take things personally as well.
Yes.
Because as I said, these kids are feeling very conflicted.
In saying that, I mean, everyone has their own parenting styles, and this can confuse children, I guess, when they're being parented by a range of different approaches, and each with different expectations possibly as well, especially if there are issues or negative reactions, like you just said, from a stepchild, the other parent in particular. So do you have any advice on how to maybe best approach this situation? And what happens if you potentially, talking about different parenting styles as well, if you and your partner possibly have different opinions on how to co-parent?
Look,
how can couples work through these differences, do you reckon?
Okay, so I'll let you know, I've been a step parent for 15 years. I've never spoken to or met my husband's ex, which to me has been very sad. So as I said, my step son down the track said, look, you've never badmouthed this and that. And I said, but it's a shame, because there's a lot of missed opportunities that have happened. My biggest advice for everybody is have a meeting. Have a meeting at a neutral place. All right, you don't need to be best friends between the exes and between the step parents, but you need to work on common ground. You need to work on common ground, because otherwise it's been like an ostrich where you're putting your head in the sand. I wanted to meet my husband's ex to say, look, what do you expect of me as your children's stepmom? Because I don't want to take over your role. These are some things that I think would be workable in a household, but I certainly don't want to have a set of rules in my house that are completely different to the rules in your house, because it's too much for little brains to be able to deal with. That meeting was never had. So, it was up to my husband to deal with bits and pieces. And that's another reason why I wanted to write the book, because I thought this is just not normal behavior. Because at some point you have to logistically say that even if your ex has repartnered first, you're probably going to repartner down the track. You might not repartner at the same times, but at some point, odds are you will actually meet someone else. All right. But if you spent 10 years of being bitter and being nasty and this and that, you can't get those 10 years back. And you've always got to think as to what impact is it having on the children.
Yes. Getting back to the children, I mean, and co-parenting, if you have, or do you have maybe any tips for how parents can best manage a child's behavior management, and for example, maybe having consequences for when they maybe misbehave, which, I mean, did you have any experience with that sort of stuff at all, and or any tips at all?
Look, I was very lucky. I didn't have any of that problem, which was good. But I always made sure that I was very objective and quite firm and quite fair. I left any disciplining that needed to be done to my husband, and because that was his role as well. And again, they had a mum and a dad. There were a couple of niggly bits of behaviour, and I did say, listen, this is not acceptable. And they was, oh, you're not my mum. But I would just say, no, I'm not your mum, but I am your stepmum. I do love and care about you, and you need to really pull yourself together. Otherwise, you'll find that, maybe you won't be coming over and visiting again. It was like, oh, no, naturally, I wouldn't have followed through with that. I'm being, taking a bit of poetic license here. But that's what I say. Kids will test you. They will test you, but you need to be on that same page, and you need to be able to have your partner say to his kids, or in our case, listen, if you act in this way, you're disrespecting me, you're disrespecting the family, you're disrespecting your stepmom as well, and really there's no need for this type of behaviour. Why are you doing it? What's going on? It's all about asking the why. Yes,
yeah. And I'd love to go back to what you said at the start of the chat about when you extended your family. Now, what happens when, you have extended the family by wanting to have a baby together with your new partner? I mean, how can step parents best be considerate about the feelings of the other children?
Yeah, okay. So at the time when we had our children, my step son was 14, my stepdaughter was 13. Naturally, when you start to show, then you say, and I just said, listen, you're always this you'll always be brothers and sisters, you'll always be related. We had a bit of funny stuff where they'd evidently been told by their mum, oh, it's only your half brother, it's only half, and they used that term, and I said, oh, look, that's a bit of a shame. I don't actually quite like that term. I'm an only child. And I said, well, you're half your dad and half your mum, and this baby will be half your dad and half me. I like the term that you'll be brothers and sisters. Yeah, okay, you're not full-blooded, but I don't like that half term. And when they actually stopped and thought about it, they said, yeah, you're right. I mean, they were very excited, but they were sort of at that age where they're a little bit older. They were intrigued as to whether it would be a boy or a girl or something like that. I always say to people, if you've got younger stepkids, depending on how it is, a couple of tips: don't just talk incessantly about the new baby in your tummy. All right, don't talk incessantly about it. Make sure that you're still asking your stepchildren what's going on in their lives, what's going on in their school life, what they're interested in as well. If, depending on the age of the kids, if you're going to go out and get some, maybe a cot or a pram or a car seat, if it's applicable, take your stepchild with you. So would you like to come and choose something for the baby? If you know, if you're having a boy or a girl, help me pick some stuff. If you don't know the gender, just go for white or something like that, or whatever it might be. A really good tip, which is what I did with our youngest before we had our third, is if you've got your stepchild, you might want to pack them a little nappy bag or diaper bag, so that when baby does arrive, they've got like a little nappy and a pot of cream, and they're all sort of excited a bit with it as well. I asked my stepkids if they had any ideas for names. And it was quite funny. They had a couple of ideas, and that's what I say to people. You don't need to go with what your stepkids want to call your baby, but maybe they might come up with a name that could be a middle name or something like that. Just a little bit of an involvement. Even
that's a great idea.
Have you got any questions? Yeah, have you got any questions that you want to ask me, or what do you think this will be like? I also said to them, this, when your mum and your dad had you, your mum would have gone through very similar things that I'm going through. I'm feeling a bit tired today, or look, my tummy's getting bigger. You just involve it a bit in the conversation. But I think one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of younger stepmoms do is everything is, oh, baby, baby, baby. No. You're having a baby. All right, it's very unlikely that your stepkid's mum is going to be jumping around the room doing cartwheels, given that you're having a baby with her ex. All right, let's be realistic about this. So you don't need to rub it in, and you don't need to try and get your stepchildren onto your side. All right, because that's not how it all works. Just be very matter of fact in do it. Don't crow over it and this and that, because otherwise it'll just backfire. But involve your stepkids as well.
I guess that I'm very to ensure that they feel equally special. Would you say?
Yes, absolutely. And if you've got the little photo of the ultrasound, say, look, would you like to have a look at the picture? Oh, okay. Now, if they say no, thank you. Don't start saying, oh, why don't you want to have a look? Just leave it. Say, okay. And then maybe at a later time say, look, is there any reason why, you might not want to have a look at the picture? Then they might say to you, oh, mum says we're not allowed to look. And then you'll know. In the same time, don't say, oh, your mum's wrong. Just say, oh, okay, all right, that's all right. When they've gone back to their mums, talk to your partner and say, listen, can you have a chat to your ex, and stuff like that. That's what I was saying. That's what I cover in my book. A lot of these things you may not think of, because you'll be very excited about the baby. That's your future. But always remember, sometimes when you're having a baby, it can stir up a lot of emotionally jealous feelings in the ex, because don't forget, that was her dream and her life once.
Yes. Well, talk about the positive aspect of step parenting. How would you describe the rewards of step parenting?
All right. The rewards are there's nothing nicer than seeing the development of children. And if you've been able to help in their upbringing or help them with something that you're skilled in, might be cooking, it might be sewing, it might be something like that, they're able to sort of enjoy some of the things that you've done. If they've, got some good results at school, maybe you've helped them with a bit of maths or something, or you've given them confidence going for a job interview. Perhaps you've said, listen, shine your shoes. And when you go to see someone, shake their hand, look them in the eye, be really positive. I mean, I know with my stepson, when he was going for a job, he said the best advice I ever gave him is, I said, listen, if you don't get this job, it doesn't mean that you're not any good. It just means that the company is looking for somebody else. And I used to use the analogy and say, every football game that you go out to play, there's only going to be one winner. All right. But it doesn't mean that you don't then try just as hard the next time around, the next week, to win the next game. Don't try not to take things personally. I tried to give a much bigger, sort of broader worldwide perspective on things. And I think that's incredibly important for young people now. They're in an incredibly stressful environment. They're dealing with a lot more things than you and I ever had to deal with. There's more pressure on them than ever at school. We hear a lot of issues about mental health and things like that. But I think one of the most positive rewards that you can get as a step parent is being able to talk to your stepchildren and let them know that you are actually there for them, that you're another head on shoulders that they can actually ask advice to. I mean, I remember my stepdaughter after year 12, she said, what do you think about gap years? And I said, evidently you want one, and evidently your mum and dad aren't keen on you having one, and neither would your aunts or uncles be. And she just started laughing. And I said, well, tell me why you want a gap year. And so she told me. And then I said, have you had the positives and the negatives weighed up to you? You know, for example, if you go away for a year, you've got a uni place, will you be competing? Will you finish a year later than your other friends? What do you think is the right thing to do? And I said, but I'm not going to tell you. I'm just going to, well, anyway, she went away, weighed it up. She ended up just going away for 6 months, and then she ended up doing double the amount of study to catch up with the others. But I think the positive things is knowing that your stepchildren can actually talk to you and ask you some advice, but also being well aware that they may not take all your advice, and you've also got to realize what they're saying to you and try and look a little bit deeper as well, and let your partner know or something. That's nothing to do with breaking a child's confidence, but as a step parent, you've got to realize that, you know, you owe it to your partner to perhaps say some of the things that they're talking about as well.
Well, we've definitely covered off a lot today.
I'm trying to look at these 10 tips. I'm so
That's
sorry.
Okay.
I don't know where the 10 tips have
It's
gone.
absolutely fine. We'll provide the link in the show notes for people to go online and read the article. But if you were to, to summarize, your 3 biggest tips that you would like people to take away from our chat today, what would they be?
Okay, thanks, Rachel. So I think my 3 biggest tips are your ex is not your kid's ex and never will be. That is number 1. Number 2 would be parenting is not a competition between step parents and parents. We should all be on the same side, and that's the side that loves and cares and supports and wants the best for these children going forward, because the odds are they will probably end up being step parents themselves. And if they haven't seen good workable relationships between all the adults, they're going to replicate dysfunctional behavior down the track. And the other thing, as much as you might want to, it is not your job to fix your stepchildren. All right. And sometimes just remember, just being there is enough to make that difference. Let me just give a little aside with that. If you have married a widower and you are the only parent there, that takes on a bit of a different role and a different dynamic, and that's up to you to work out with your partner as well. But in the main, just be there for your stepchildren, keep open communication happening, and try and be as positive as you can be, and realize that if you're experiencing a bit of pushback, which will happen during the teenage years, a lot of it is hormones, highly strung individuals, stress from school and things, try not to take some of that surliness and that irritability personally, because whether you're a step parent or a parent, you all go through it with kids.
Karalee, this has been wonderful. If anyone's got any other questions for you, whereabouts can they find you?
Oh, lovely. Well, look, thank you so much, Rachel, and thank you to you and Kiddopedia. And let me just say, you run an amazing business, an amazing site. You bring such a wealth of information to everybody when it comes to parenting, because as they say, it's one of the most difficult jobs in the world, can be rewarding, step parenting and parenting. So how you find me is, look, my book is available. It's available off my website, which is I'm sure you'll put the link. It's KaraleeKatsambanis.com. It is available from Dimmix. It's available from Amazon and Booktopia. A lot of people like ordering it from the website because I'm very happy to inscribe it for you if you'd like. And I'm just on social media. It's just Karalee Katsambanis. I'm on Instagram at Karalee Katsambanis. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook. And I'm really happy just to, if anyone wants to just send me a message through Messenger or something, or through the website, KaraleeKatsambanis.com, with any questions, I'm really happy. If I can give a few bits of advice that might make your life as a step parent a bit easier, create a bit more harmony within your step family, then my job is done. And I've just had such a lovely response from this book that when I wanted to write it all those years ago, I thought, yes, there is a need for this book. And I'm glad that it's hitting the mark and it is actually helping a lot of people.
That's just wonderful. And all of those links we'll have in the show notes. So by all means, anyone watching or listening, if you do have questions, please reach out. She's an amazing resource. Thank you, Karalee, so much for your time. And let's chat again soon, hopefully in the not too distant future.
Take care. I'd love to. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Rachel. You're lovely. And to all your team as well. Thank you so much.
All right, take care. Thank you. Bye, Karalee.
Bye. See ya. Bye.